From now on, this house is no longer mine." Daniel's cold words struck me like a knife to the heart. I stood frozen in the middle of the living room, a space that just an hour ago had been filled with the chirping of birds outside the window and the scent of the half-finished hot tea I'd made. But now it had all suddenly become hell. On the table, the ownership transfer paper was still wet with ink. Vanessa crossed her arms, a triumphant smile curving her lips. Daniel, the son I had raised for 32 years, sat there, silent, his eyes cold and unfamiliar. I felt as though I had stumbled into a nightmare, a cruel joke where the perpetrator was my own flesh and blood. I lunged forward, my hands trembling as I grabbed the stack of papers, but the bold letters on them made my vision blur. My name had been crossed out, replaced by a forged, scribbled, yet legal signature. "Just 1 hour. I was only gone to the market for an hour. How could everything turn into this?" I muttered, tears streaming down my face, while Vanessa let out a dry laugh. "Don't blame yourself. Your mistake was trusting too much." My heart felt like it was shattering into a million pieces. A part of my life had been stolen, right from the very house I had built with my sweat and tears. My name is Margaret. I am 58 years old. Half my life has been spent in toil and hardship. From the day my husband, the only man I ever loved, died suddenly in a work accident when Daniel was only 10 years old, I knew I could no longer afford to be weak. I took on every job imaginable, selling vegetables at the market by day, working at a diner by night, and sometimes taking on extra sewing work to afford my son's education. This house, the small 2-story home with its old red tile roof, was the greatest achievement of my entire life. It was not just a shelter from the sun and rain, but a repository of memories, my very flesh and blood, my only source of pride after enduring so many storms. In the eyes of my neighbors, I was a strong woman who doted on her son. I never imagined that one day, the son I loved and protected with all I had would be the one to cause me the most pain. That day, Daniel was very young, only 10 years old, as thin as a young sugarcane stalk. My house back then hadn't been built up to the 2nd floor yet. The tin roof creaked and groaned with every gust of wind and rain. In the evenings, the two of us would sit by the dim oil lamp. I would sew clothes for hire while teaching my son to read. Every time Daniel learned a new word, his eyes would light up like little stars, making me forget all my fatigue. On some bitterly cold days, I could only afford to buy one small bowl of pho. I would pretend to be full, claiming a headache and not eating, giving it all to my son. Daniel would look at me and shake his head. "No, Mother must eat some. If you get sick, what will I do?" Those words choked me up, but I suppressed my tears, took a small bite just for show, and then pushed the rest towards him. The day Daniel received his first scholarship, he ran home breathlessly, holding the paper in front of me. "Mom, I did it. I'll work hard to buy you a new, bigger, more beautiful house someday." I burst into tears and hugged him. I etched that innocent promise in my heart, like a small flame warming me through the difficult years. At night, I would often hear Daniel whisper in his sleep, "I'll take care of you, Mom. Don't be sad." Those innocent sounds became my tranquilizer, giving me the strength to stay up countless nights working. I still vividly remember the stormy night when Daniel turned 16. The wind howled through every crack in the door, the tin roof rattled violently, and rainwater dripped into the basin in the living room with a rhythmic plink, plink. Exhausted after a long day of selling goods at the market, I was struggling to contain the leaks when Daniel suddenly appeared, holding an old, worn-out raincoat. "Mom, sit down and rest. Let me handle it," he said, his voice both firm and clumsy. I laughed through my tears. "You're still young. What do you know about handling things? Leave the grown-up matters to me." Daniel shook his head, his eyes shining with a determination that surprised me. He sat down beside me and whispered, "I don't want to see you suffer anymore. Later, when I have a job and money, I will buy you a new house. You won't have to stay up all night sewing or shiver under this leaky roof anymore." "I promise." I froze. In that moment, I saw the image of my late husband flicker in my son's eyes, a gaze full of responsibility and love. I hugged Daniel tightly, listening to his rapid heartbeat, and whispered back, "As long as you keep that promise, I can die with no regrets." That night, the rain outside still roared, but my heart felt unusually warm. I believed with all my heart that Daniel was my only anchor, my only hope in life. But little did I know, decades later, that very hand, the hand that once held mine tightly under the leaky tin roof years ago, would be the one to sign the papers that took everything away. Daniel was once a kind, quiet young man, sentimental and thoughtful of his mother. But everything began to change the day he brought Vanessa home to meet me. Vanessa, a beautiful, sharp-witted girl whose sweet words charmed everyone in the neighborhood. But her eyes, from the first moment I saw them, sent a shiver down my spine. They were not the eyes of a woman who only wanted to build a family, but cold, calculating eyes. At first, Vanessa acted filial, often helping me with chores, calling me Mom with a saccharine tone. I never suspected that behind that gentle smile lay a trap. Just a few months after they got married, Daniel began to change. He spoke less with me, instead often whispering with his wife behind closed doors. He started to nitpick. "This house is too small. Don't you think we'll need more space later?" Then came the veiled suggestions. "You live alone. You don't need that much. Why not let us take ownership of the house so you can feel more at ease?" I heard it as if I'd been doused with cold water. This house was my life's work, Daniel's birthplace, yet he now spoke such callous words. I tried to force a smile, telling myself it was just idle talk. But the change in Daniel's eyes, from warmth to coldness, made my heart ache. With each passing day, the distance between my son and me grew wider, and I began to see that Vanessa was the one behind all these changes. Vanessa became more and more involved in all of Daniel's decisions. She no longer maintained the gentle demeanor of a new daughter-in-law. Instead, she gave disdainful looks and sharp, cutting words. In front of me, Vanessa remained sweet. "Oh, Mom, I love you dearly, but you have to think of us too. How can we possibly raise children in such a tiny house later on?" But the moment I turned my back, her voice turned icy. "Daniel, if you want a future, you need to cut off dead weight. If the house is in your mother's name, what will you gain later? Do you want to live in her shadow your entire life?" I accidentally overheard this conversation one night when I got up for a drink of water. I stood there, frozen behind the door, my heart pounding. Daniel was silent for a long moment, then replied softly, hoarsely, "But that's Mom's hard work. Don't you feel guilty?" Vanessa scoffed. "Can guilt feed us? Can pity support a wife and children?" "Wake up." From then on, Daniel changed completely. He no longer hesitated. He began asking me about the land title deed and house papers, claiming he wanted to help Mom manage them safely. I politely refused, but my heart trembled. Then, strange signs began to appear. One afternoon, I saw Vanessa making a secret phone call, her voice low, mentioning notarization and signatures. In the kitchen, I found a strange bill for a large sum, signed by Daniel. A close neighbor discreetly pulled me aside and whispered, "Be careful. I've seen them bring strange people to look at the house a few times." Each clue was like a knife stabbing deeper into my heart. My son, the one who swore to protect me, was now secretly plotting with his wife to rob me of my only home. I started paying closer attention, memorizing every detail, every unusual paper. But the more I looked, the more I realized a real storm was brewing right in my own home. I began hiding a small notebook in the drawer, recording every unusual detail my eyes and ears took in. Every number, every bill, Every stolen conversation became a milestone on my journey to find the truth. One afternoon, while Daniel was at work and Vanessa was napping, I sneaked into their room. On the dressing table, I found a half-closed file. My trembling hands flipped it open, and page after page struck my eyes. A deposit contract with a real estate brokerage firm. It clearly stated the representative's name was Daniel. I almost collapsed. I couldn't believe my son could be so deeply involved. Not stopping there, I also found a photocopy of my house's land deed. The red seal was still clear. I clearly remembered never lending the land deed to Daniel, so how did this copy appear? While I was still in shock, Vanessa's phone rang. I jumped, my trembling hand reaching for the mobile phone she had left on the bed. On the screen, a series of unread messages appeared. "The paperwork is almost done, just need her signature. Remember to make her trust us enough to hand over the documents. Without her signature, it's all for nothing. Hurry, the buyers are getting impatient." I was stunned, my hands turning cold. The her in those messages could only be me. That evening, I tried to probe Daniel. "Son, Mom heard you've been frequenting the notary office lately. What's going on?" Daniel flinched slightly, but then regained his composure. "Oh, I'm just notarizing some business contracts. You worry too much, Mom." I looked deep into his eyes, but that gaze was no longer as innocent as before. In those eyes, I saw the reflection of a stranger, so strange it sent a shiver down my spine. That night, I tossed and turned, my heart clenched with unease. I knew that if I didn't act soon, one day I would lose everything, right from the hands of the child I loved the most. The nightmare I had feared for so long had finally descended. One morning, as I returned from the market, not yet having put away my basket of vegetables, the doorbell rang. 2 men in suits walked in, holding files. One of them smiled politely. "Mrs. Margaret, we're here to verify the house transfer as requested by your son, Daniel." I was speechless. Before I could even process, Vanessa emerged from a room, dressed impeccably, a radiant smile on her face. "Yes, that's right. This is my mother-in-law. She agreed to the name transfer. She just hasn't signed the final paperwork." I whirled around to face Daniel. He stood hiding behind his wife, his head bowed, not daring to meet my eyes. My heart ached. I gritted my teeth. "Daniel, say something. When did I agree? Who gave you permission to do this without my knowledge?" Vanessa immediately interjected, her voice sweet but calculating. "Mom, didn't you say you'd let us put the house in our name for convenience? Besides, you're getting older, and if anything were to happen, who would inherit the house? It's best if we handle it." Every word she spoke was like a knife cutting into my flesh. Trembling, I snatched the file from the staff member's hand and stared intently at the signature. A forged signature, scribbled yet disturbingly accurate. I screamed, "This isn't my handwriting! What have you done? Daniel, did you personally hand over these documents?" Daniel remained silent. That silence was more brutal than any confession. Curious neighbors began to gather. I heard whispers. "Oh my, a son deceiving his own mother. This daughter-in-law is truly formidable." My face burned with shame, but my heart grew cold. The home I had built with a lifetime of sweat and tears was now being stolen by my own flesh and blood, witnessed by so many. I knew this was only the beginning. A real battle had begun, and I could not back down. I decided I could no longer remain silent. After the incident with the real estate agent showing up at my home, I summoned all our relatives, using my husband's death anniversary, Daniel's father, as an excuse. I wanted everything to be brought to light, right in front of our family. The house was packed with people. Familiar faces sat close together, and whispers filled the air. On the altar, my husband's photo looked down, as if silently witnessing everything. I stood up, my voice trembling but resolute. Today I want to question my son and his wife directly. While I am alive and of sound mind, Why are there documents transferring ownership of the house to Daniel and Vanessa? Why does my forged signature appear on those papers? The room fell into a stunned silence. Daniel lowered his head, while Vanessa tightly gripped her husband's hand and spoke in a clear voice. "Mother, why would you say such a thing? I would never." "We just wanted to make arrangements for the future, so that if anything were to happen, the house wouldn't be eyed by outsiders. If there's any mistake, it must be a mix-up at the notary's office." An elder from the family cleared his throat softly. "But I heard from neighbors that you two have brought people to view the house several times. How can you call it a misunderstanding?" The atmosphere in the room immediately became as tense as a drawn bowstring. I stared intently into my son's eyes, enunciating each word. "Daniel, answer me. Do you truly intend to seize this house from your mother?" Daniel remained silent. His silence caused the relatives to murmur, some with sympathy, others with suspicion. I felt as though my heart was being squeezed, but I knew this public battle had just begun. The whispers grew louder, and a suffocating atmosphere enveloped the room. Before I could say anything more, Vanessa suddenly burst into tears, her voice cracking. "Aunties, uncles!" I swear I had no ill intentions. I just wanted Mother to be at peace. But ever since I became your daughter-in-law, you've disliked me, always being wary and treating me like an outsider. I've endured so much. The entire family was stunned. Some elderly members shook their heads with sympathy, chiding, "Margaret, you're both women. Why be so harsh?" I trembled with anger, slamming my hand on the table. You believe her words? If I hadn't discovered the deposit contract, if I hadn't seen the forged signature with my own eyes, this house would be gone by now. Do you think I made it all up? Vanessa, quick as lightning, pulled a piece of paper from her pocket and held it out in the middle of the table. "Here, this is the promissory note from Mother. You asked my husband to borrow money for your medical treatment, so why pretend you don't know? In return, you agreed to let us put the house in our names." I was stunned. The handwriting on the paper was indeed mine, but the content was a blatant fabrication. I cried out, trembling, "This is a forgery! I never wrote anything like this!" Daniel finally looked up, his eyes filled with uncertainty. "Mom, or did you forget? You're getting old sometimes." Those words were like a knife piercing deep into my heart. The whole room erupted in murmurs of displeasure, some believing, some doubting. I looked around, and the familiar faces I'd known for so long now clearly showed suspicion. I shouted, my voice choked in my throat. "My son! My own son is siding with his wife to concoct a story and falsely accuse his mother. Oh God, is there any greater pain than this?" The air was tense, suffocating. I knew this battle couldn't be won or lost right then, but at that very moment, a fire ignited in my heart. I would not let them easily seize what I had spent my entire life to protect. The room fell silent. Only the thumping of my heart could be heard. I cast a pained glance at my son, hoping he would refute, hoping he would defend me, but he didn't. Daniel just lowered his head, letting Vanessa cry, fabricate, and drown out all my words. A distant uncle stood up, banging his hand on the table. "Enough! This is too complicated. But if Margaret truly has debts, then it's reasonable for Daniel and his wife to be listed as the homeowners. After all, old people can't take their possessions with them when they go." I gasped for breath, blood rushing to my face. I gritted my teeth, my hand trembling as I pulled a stack of papers from my pocket. "Here, my savings deposit certificates. I don't owe anyone anything. I don't need your pity, but I will not allow anyone to falsely accuse me." The atmosphere exploded. Some people gasped, exchanging suspicious glances. My maternal aunt suddenly stepped forward, pointing directly at Vanessa. "I saw everything. Last week, I saw you at the notary office. You were even talking to someone about changing the land title name. Don't even try to deny it." The entire room was shaken. Vanessa's face paled, but she gritted her teeth. She must have misheard. How can relatives spread such lies? Daniel's face lost all color. He stammered, "Vanessa, is that true?" Vanessa spun around, gripping her husband's hand tightly. "You shut up. Do you want to abandon your wife and child?" Murmurs erupted like rolling waves. Some sided with me, while others were still manipulated by Vanessa. I stood amidst the chaotic vortex, tears streaming down my face, but my eyes burning with fire. I took a deep breath, then declared loudly, "If you don't believe me, I will take this matter to court. I swear, even if I have to confront my own flesh and blood, I will defend this house to the end. This is not just bricks and mortar. This is my honor, my blood and tears." The murmurs fell silent. All eyes turned to me. In that very second, I knew. The public battle had officially begun, and there was no turning back for me. After that suffocating family meeting, I knew I could no longer rely on kinship or the pity of a few people. To protect the house, I had to turn to the law. The next morning, I quietly went to a law firm. A middle-aged man named Robert listened to my explanation, his eyes grave. After reviewing the photocopy of the deposit contract that I had managed to keep, he frowned. "Mrs. Margaret, this clearly shows signs of a forged signature. If the notary public truly overlooked such a document, then someone must have arranged this behind the scenes." I nodded tremulously. Robert continued, "We will file a request to suspend the transaction, and at the same time, examine all property records at the Resources Department. I believe we will find irregularities soon." Hearing this, I felt a great burden lifted. For the first time in weeks, I felt I was not alone. But a vague fear still arose in my heart. Vanessa was not someone who would give up easily. As expected, just a few days later, as the lawyers were submitting documents to the court, I discovered my bank account was frozen. The bank teller informed me that they received information about me being involved in an unpaid debt. I was stunned. I had never borrowed money from anyone, so why did the bank records clearly state a debt of over $50,000? I understood immediately. It was Vanessa's counterattack. Within a week, the entire neighborhood was buzzing with rumors that I had debts and planned to sell the house to pay the interest. The rumors spread so fast that even when I went to the market, I could hear people whispering behind my back. "I heard Mrs. Margaret owes over $50,000 and the bank is about to seize her house. That's probably why the hurried transfer happened." Poor Daniel having to take care of his family and an elderly mother. I felt a surge of indignation, wanting to explain, but no one would believe me. In everyone's eyes, Vanessa played the role of the unfortunate daughter-in-law too perfectly. She cried and complained. We just wanted to help Mother pay her debts, but Mother blamed us, saying we were greedy. And Daniel? He didn't speak directly, but he didn't deny it either. His silence was like a knife plunged directly into my back. When I went to the bank for clarification, the staff showed me a loan application in my name, complete with signatures, fingerprints, and even a photocopy of my ID. I picked it up, my hands trembling. All of it was forged, but too perfectly for an outsider to discern. I was dazed, almost collapsing at the counter. The people around me looked at me with a mixture of pity and contempt. Vanessa stood at the bank entrance, pretending to comfort me. "Don't worry, Mother. If you truly can't afford to pay, leave the house to us. I promise I'll find you a decent place to live." I gritted my teeth, tears welling up. At that moment, I understood that I was not only facing betrayal, but also a sophisticated scheme that had been prepared for a long time. Vanessa didn't just want the house. She wanted to destroy my reputation and credibility, so no one would stand by me anymore. But I also swore silently in my heart. "You can tarnish me, but you will never take away what is built from my blood and tears. I will fight back with all the remaining strength I have." That evening, I held the file of forged loan documents, tears streaming down my face uncontrollably. I took them all to my lawyer, Robert. He examined each page very carefully, then slammed the table. "Just as I predicted, these are forged documents. The signatures have been scanned and reprinted multiple times. The ink distribution is uneven.
Most importantly, the fingerprints do not match completely. With an expert examination, we will expose them." Hearing this, I choked back a sob, as if I had just grasped a lifeline. Robert immediately submitted a request for fingerprint and signature verification. At the same time, he also proposed to the court to temporarily freeze all transactions related to the house, preventing Daniel and Vanessa from selling it off quickly. A few days later, the preliminary results came back. The signatures on the loan documents and the transfer contract did not match my original signature samples. This meant someone had used sophisticated tricks to fabricate everything. This news was like a beam of light tearing through the darkness. I gripped Robert's hand tightly, my voice trembling. "Thank you. Finally, the truth is slowly coming to light." But I also knew Vanessa would not give up easily. Indeed, as soon as the appraisal information leaked, she immediately counterattacked, hiring people to spread rumors online that I was old and senile, couldn't remember what I signed. Those malicious rumors spread, causing many people to panic. But this time, I was no longer alone. Robert said calmly, "Mrs. Margaret, public opinion is just superficial. What matters is the law. We will bring this evidence to court, and then no one can deny it anymore." I clutched the stack of papers in my hand. For the first time since the dark days, I felt the fire in my heart blaze strongly. I would fight to the end. News about the house, the transfer, and the forged papers began to leak, but not from Vanessa or Daniel, but from a small and sincere source, Mrs. Hahn, the neighbor who had lived next door for over 30 years. She told a young reporter from the local newspaper, a reporter who had helped her and her grandchild in a small charity case, that she had seen Vanessa talking to a strange man in front of the notary's office. The reporter, curious and well-intentioned, came to see me, recorded what I said, and scheduled a small report for tomorrow. The first article was cautious, describing a widowed mother in her 50s facing an accusation of being pushed aside by her son and daughter-in-law in the very house she built. The language was gentle, but enough to evoke emotion. Small details like a deposit slip found in the makeup drawer, a mysteriously appearing copy of the property deed were mentioned, along with Mrs. Hahn's account. As soon as the article was published, the small social media networks in the city exploded. People who had known me from before started sharing and commenting. Many remembered the nights my son and I sat under the oil lamp, remembered the times I sold vegetables to send my son to school. Public sentiment shifted in my favor. A few small groups immediately called for help. A woman at the market promised to collect birthday money for me, and a painter offered to help repair the roof for free. Vanessa saw this wave of public opinion and her face flushed. She could not let the situation go in an unfavorable direction. And that's when the media war began to escalate. No longer neighborly whispers, but a war of words through articles, comments, and videos accusing and counter-accusing. When the second report came out, this time with a short interview of me, where I spoke about my poor childhood and Daniel's promise, the shares skyrocketed. A short video cut from the interview went viral. It showed me, my hands tanned and weathered, holding a file, my voice trembling but firm. "This is my house. I cannot let them take it away." Many viewers cried along, but Vanessa did not give up. She hired a small PR team, a few social media accounts, a local blogger, to spin the story in a different direction. The mother is fraudulent, signed for a loan, and deliberately tricked her son. Articles with eye-catching headlines, accompanied by photoshopped images, spread quickly on less moderated channels. Malicious comments appeared. "That old woman is senile. Such a kind daughter-in-law, why would the mother-in-law bully her?" Gradually, an initially neutral public opinion turned into two opposing poles. I realized the battle was not just in the courtroom, but also a fight for the hearts of the public. Robert, my lawyer, reminded me,
Don't engage in random online arguments, Mrs. Margaret.
Every unintentional response can be taken out of context. Let the law do its work, but at the same time, we need public witnesses. So I remained calm, not fighting back against every slanderous word. Instead, a few neighbors and a reporter went to find more evidence. The convenience store's camera near the mortuary confirmed that strangers had visited the house multiple times, and at one point, they even saw Vanessa and the strange man enter the living room with a bag of documents. Public opinion was now divided. Those who supported me with emotion and memories, and those who were influenced by Vanessa's media campaign. The social atmosphere around me became heavy. Some looked at me with pity, others kept their distance, not wanting to get involved. Just when I thought I was being cornered, an experienced investigative reporter from a major city newspaper decided to get involved. He didn't make a fuss, but he asked sharp questions. Who benefited the most from the transfer?
He followed leads, called the notary's office, directly questioned the staff, checked the area cameras, and compared the seals. Then he met the man who appeared on camera, who turned out to be an unregistered broker, previously involved in several shady transfers. His investigative report was published with evidence, camera photos, transaction receipts between the broker and Vanessa, retrieved from public trash, and excerpts of testimony from a notary who had been pressured to sign a draft. The article used cautious but powerful language. The pieces from the cameras, invoices, and testimony indicated a plan was orchestrated to forge signatures and create fake loan documents to force Mrs. Margaret to hand over the house. The twist came from a voice recording the reporter obtained from a fearful witness. The witness heard Vanessa tell the broker, "No need to rush too much, just make her trust you, then get her signature." When the post with the excerpt was published, public opinion rapidly reversed. Vanessa's PR accounts went silent, and the smear articles were fact-checked and gradually refuted. The community erupted with public apologies to me. Those who had doubted me began to feel ashamed, and some spoke out in support and gathered evidence to help me. Vanessa was heavily criticized, with furious comments flooding her personal page. Daniel, seeing his wife's reputation crumble under public scrutiny, seemed more bewildered than ever. At the end of this segment, a clear turning point had occurred. The media was no longer an absolute enemy. If used correctly, it could become a weapon to expose the truth. But I knew the fight for justice was far from over. The court still lay ahead, and Vanessa would fight back. On the day of the trial, I wore the old ow dye my husband had once given me. I wanted to stand there, not just as a betrayed mother, but as a resilient woman defending her honor. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, neighbors, even strangers squeezed in to witness the proceedings. The air was thick, the creaking of wooden chairs like knives piercing the heart. The judge rapped his gavel. "We now begin the property dispute trial between Mrs. Margaret and her son Daniel and his wife Vanessa." I held my head high, looking directly at the young couple seated opposite. Daniel avoided my gaze, his face gaunt, while Vanessa maintained a facade of composure, her lips curled into a dismissive smile. Lawyer Robert stood up and presented. "Your Honor, we have sufficient evidence to prove the loan application and house transfer contract are forged. The signatures do not match, the fingerprints are inconsistent, and witnesses saw the defendant directly working with an unauthorized broker." The room buzzed. The judge leaned forward. "Does the defense have any comment?" Vanessa's lawyer shot up, his voice sharp and cold. "Your Honor, Mrs. Margaret is elderly, and her memory is failing. She could easily be mistaken. Her denial of the signature is merely a way to evade responsibility because she doesn't want to repay the debt. We have bank transaction confirmations in her name." I clenched my fists, feeling my heart constrict, but I knew this battle had just begun, and I would not crumble before all these watching eyes. Lawyer Robert stepped forward, holding a thick file, his voice resounding. "Your Honor, may we present a video clip extracted from the security camera of a grocery store near Mrs. Margaret's home?" The screen lit up. Vanessa appeared, accompanied by a strange man, carrying a file bag as they entered my house. The next scene showed her signing papers and handing him money. The courtroom fell silent, then erupted in a murmur like breaking waves. Vanessa tried to maintain her calm. "This proves nothing. I merely asked him to help with some paperwork. There was nothing illegal." Robert remained unfazed. He then presented another stack of papers. "These are the results of the fingerprint analysis. The bank loan document bearing Mrs. Margaret's name, the fingerprints on it do not fully match. The matching rate is only 64%, while the legal requirement is over 95%. This means someone forged the fingerprints." The judge frowned and rapped his gavel for order. All eyes began to turn towards me. Just then, a trembling voice spoke from the witness stand. "Your Honor, I wish to testify." All heads turned. It was a young notary, his face pale. He bowed his head. "I was the one forced to sign preliminary documents for the transfer contract. Ms. Vanessa threatened to ruin my career if I refused. But after seeing the news reports, I couldn't stay silent anymore." A murmur erupted. Vanessa turned pale. Daniel's eyes widened. I looked at my son, my heart aching. His eyes were distant, as if his whole world was collapsing. Robert concluded his presentation. "Your Honor, with the video, the forensic report, and the eyewitness testimony, we assert that the loan application and the transfer contract were both forged. This is an act of fraud and asset misappropriation." The judge nodded, his expression stern. "We will review all evidence before reaching a verdict." The courtroom held its breath. I clutched the hem of my dye, my heart pounding. Just one more step, justice was within reach. The air in the courtroom was thick, everyone holding their breath in anticipation. The judge turned to the defendants. "Mr. Daniel, Ms. Vanessa, do you have any comments on the evidence just presented?" Daniel stood up, trembling. His gaze flickered, his hands clenched until they turned purple. He looked at me, his eyes seeming to want to say something, but choked back by his throat. In the end, he only managed a weak utterance. I didn't know things would turn out this way." Vanessa immediately snatched her husband's hand, pulling him back to his seat, and shouted, "Don't listen to them. It's all a setup. She wants to bring us down. Those witnesses were all bribed." The room erupted in a wave of protest. The judge banged his gavel, his voice sharp. "Miss Vanessa, please remain calm. We base our decisions on legal evidence, not emotions." Robert took another step forward, his voice cold. "Your Honor, we have one final piece of evidence." He produced a recording. Vanessa's voice was clear. "Don't worry, we just need to get her signature. Everything will be fine." The room was stunned. Vanessa's face stiffened, her lips pressed together, her eyes blazing with anger. Daniel slumped down, covering his head with his hands. Their relatives in the back burst into tears, whispers filling the air. "Oh my God, she would do that to her own mother." The judge pondered for a long moment, then banged his gavel forcefully. "After reviewing all the evidence, the court declares the house transfer contract and the loan application are null and void due to forgery. Ownership of the house belongs to Mrs. Margaret. Furthermore, the case of document forgery will be handed over to the investigative authorities for legal exuli." I burst into tears, the water flowing like a broken dam. A feeling of both pain and relief washed over my chest. I had kept the house, not just a home, but the soul of my entire life. Across the aisle, Vanessa shrieked and cursed, desperately trying to hold on to Daniel. But Daniel sat immobile, his eyes vacant. The trial concluded amidst the uproar, but within me, an absolute calm spread. Justice had prevailed. After the court's verdict, public opinion erupted like a storm. Major newspapers ran headlines. "Son and daughter-in-law forged documents to seize mother's home." Vanessa's name became the focus of criticism, her face photoshopped and ridiculed across forums. Daniel, once admired for his image as a filial son, now became a symbol of filial impiety. The company where Daniel worked also couldn't withstand the pressure.
Just a week later, he was forced to resign. The director bluntly said, "We cannot keep an employee involved in a scandal that tarnishes the company's reputation."
Vanessa's situation was even more miserable. She had once been proud of her social connections, often flaunting them online, but now everyone turned their backs on her. The friends who used to party with her quietly unfriended and blocked her. Even Vanessa's own family couldn't bear the disgrace, calling her to scold. "You've shamed the entire family. From now on, don't ever show your face here again." Within just a few weeks, the young couple fell into complete isolation. Whenever they stepped outside, they faced scornful looks and whispered remarks. "There he is, the unfilial son.
That's the daughter-in-law who forged documents."
Hearing the news, my heart was torn between pain and relief. Pain because Daniel, the son I once placed all my hopes in, was now rejected by society. But also relief, because justice had made the wicked pay the price, and that no one could ever change. After the trial, the debts that Vanessa and Daniel had secretly taken out were gradually exposed. All were under Daniel's name, loan contracts with usurious interest rates. Once revealed, the creditors swarmed to their rented house, banging on the door, shouting, demanding repayment. At first, Daniel still tried to maintain face, pleading for more time, but within just a month, he was utterly exhausted. No job, no income, burdened with tens of thousands of dollars in debt. Daniel could only hide in fear. Every night, whenever they heard a car stop at the alley, the couple would tremble, terrified that creditors would break in. Vanessa, once accustomed to glamorous dresses and expensive cosmetics, now had to sell her belongings piece by piece. First the luxury handbags, then the wedding ring, the necklace, and finally even the collection of makeup she once bragged about online. On days with no money left, she squeezed into wholesale markets, haggling over bunches of vegetables and packets of noodles. But the worst was their rented room. Damp, cramped, with the stench of mold seeping into every fabric. On rainy nights, the corrugated roof leaked everywhere, water flooding the floor. Vanessa sat huddled in a corner, hair tangled, face gaunt and bare. Daniel, meanwhile, kept his head down in the dark room, unable to utter a word. Once, an acquaintance told me they saw Daniel at a roadside diner. He sat alone, with only a bowl of cold noodles in front of him. The acquaintance asked, "Daniel, how did it come to this?" Daniel only gave a faint smile, eyes hollow. "This is the price I have to pay." That answer pierced my heart, yet it was clear. Their financial ruin and material hardship were only the beginning of the long tragedies Daniel and Vanessa had to face. With their honor lost and their money gone, the only thing holding them together was a broken marriage. But the crushing debts, the ridicule, the social isolation turned them into enemies. In that dark rented room, arguments erupted constantly. Vanessa screamed, "If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have ended up like this. You're weak, cowardly, can't even protect your wife." Daniel retorted in despair, "You're greedy. You pushed me to betray my mother. If not for you, I wouldn't have lost everything." Neighbors often heard dishes shattering, curses echoing night after night. Gradually, Vanessa disappeared for days at a time, leaving Daniel drowning in alcohol. When she returned, exhausted and disheveled, it was only to collect a few more belongings before vanishing again. Daniel was left completely alone. Friends shunned him, and no relatives dared to reach out. Whenever he went to a family member's house, they shut the door and shook their heads. "Don't come here anymore. You've disgraced the whole family." In the end, Daniel had nothing left but to wander through cheap pubs, drinking himself unconscious, collapsing on sidewalks. Passers-by who recognized him only shook their heads in pity. That's the unfilial son who tried to steal his mother's house. No one reached out a hand to help. Later, news came that Vanessa had left the city, working in a remote bar. The once elegant face was now lined with wrinkles, her eyes filled with gloom. No one mentioned her as the luxurious daughter-in-law anymore, just a shadow fading into the night. The two who had once sat laughing arrogantly before me were now living in darkness, cast out by society, abandoned by family. And that was the price of betrayal. I knew this was not the end. The consequences were only beginning to gnaw at them, day by day, night after night, and regret still awaited them ahead. After Vanessa left, Daniel sank into a darkness of loneliness. At first, there were endless drunken stupors, but when the alcohol wore off, he had to face the terrifying emptiness within his soul. No one by his side, no job, no laughter of the little family he once boasted about with pride. On stormy nights, Daniel remembered his childhood, the days studying under a kerosene lamp, the meals where his mother gave him the best morsels, and the promise he once made, "I will take care of you, Mother." That image returned so vividly that he broke down in tears in the damp, shabby room. One evening, Daniel took pen and paper, hands trembling, and scrawled clumsy words. "Mother, I'm sorry. I was blind to follow Vanessa, letting greed cloud my eyes. I know you will never forgive me, but I still want to say this. I miss you so much." He folded the letter, intending to send it to the old address, but then hesitated, afraid his mother wouldn't open it, afraid it would be thrown away like trash. In the end, he sent it anyway. But days passed, and no reply ever came. Each night, he would open the drawer, pull out the draft of another letter, and read it over and over, like a man condemning himself. The room gradually filled with torn scraps of paper, all scribbled with unfinished lines of, "Mother, I'm sorry." Daniel knew that his mother's silence was the answer, and that was the heaviest sentence he would carry for life. Since sending that unanswered letter, Daniel drifted in a half-dream, half-waking state. Every night, nightmares tormented him. He stood in the old house, the windows blown open, rain and wind pouring in, while his mother turned her back and walked away, her frail figure fading into the night. He cried out, "Mother, wait for me," but his voice was lost, unheard. Then from the ceiling, forged loan papers began to fall, piling up and burying him alive. Daniel jolted awake, drenched in sweat, his heart pounding out of his chest. By day, he tried to reconnect. He called his mother's old number, but the cold voice of the operator replied, "The number you dialed is unavailable." He went to the old house, standing silently at the gate, peering through the iron bars at the glow of a yellow light inside. He wanted to ring the bell, to shout her name, but his legs felt nailed to the ground. A fear rose within him. If his mother came out and looked at him with contempt, could he bear it? In the end, Daniel walked away, leaving only a bouquet of white chrysanthemums at the gate, the flowers he remembered his mother used to love arranging in a ceramic vase. But when he returned the next morning, the bouquet was gone. No one knew whether his mother had taken it or a neighbor had cleared it away. Daniel sank deeper into despair. He wrote another letter, this time longer, recounting his childhood, how his mother carried him on her back across muddy roads. But when he held the envelope in his hands, he couldn't bring himself to send it. He crushed it into a ball and hurled it into a corner. And so the days passed in hopeless cycles, writing letters, tearing them up, making calls. No one answered, going to the house, then turning away. The more he tried, the farther he felt pushed from his mother's embrace, and he realized her silence was a sentence heavier than any prison. Time slipped by, and Daniel could hardly distinguish day from night. He drifted aimlessly in the dark, suffocating rented room, the window covered with a torn cloth. Empty bottles rolled under the bed. Clothes lay strewn about, shredded loan documents scattered across the floor. But the most terrifying thing was not the filth. It was the emptiness that gnawed at his spirit. Every night, Daniel dreamed the same dream. His mother stood before him, her eyes gentle yet filled with disappointment. He tried to kneel, reaching out and pleading, "Mother, forgive me, please," but she only shook her head and turned away, disappearing. Each time, Daniel would jolt awake in despair, screaming like a madman. Once he tried to visit his mother's house again. Standing at the gate, his trembling hand pressed the doorbell. But as soon as he heard footsteps approaching from inside, panic seized him, and he fled, too afraid to face her. He knew he had lost his chance, and he knew, too, that perhaps his mother would never again open that door for him. In his final days, Daniel cut off contact with everyone. Vanessa had vanished from his life. Friends, relatives, every last one had turned their backs. He was left with nothing but himself and the echoes of his mistakes. One rainy night, neighbors heard him screaming in his room, "I'm sorry, Mother, I'm sorry." The hoarse cries dragged on until his voice broke, then silence fell. No one knew whether Daniel had fallen asleep or sat frozen in the darkness. But everyone understood that remorse would haunt him until the end of his life, a sentence that could never be erased. Daniel had lost everything: home, wife, honor, friends, and the most bitter loss of all was the embrace of the mother who had once loved him unconditionally. After all the storms, my house stood whole again, proudly on the little street. But more precious than brick and tile was the serenity I found in my heart. I began to change my way of living. Each morning, I opened the windows to let the sunlight pour in, and I placed a vase of white chrysanthemums on my husband's altar as a gesture of gratitude for the years he had helped me build this home. I also took time to walk around the neighborhood, chatting with neighbors, no longer shutting myself away in grief as before. One day at the market, I met a little girl selling lottery tickets. Her eyes reminded me of Daniel as a child, bright, yet carrying a trace of worry. I bought her whole stack, then took her out for a proper meal. From that day on, I joined the church's charity group, helping orphans and the poor. Every time I saw the children's radiant smiles, I felt a deep comfort. Though my life was scarred, I could still use love to ease the pain of others. My house was no longer a prison of sorrow, but a gathering place for sharing. I opened my doors to neighborhood children in the evenings, teaching them to read and write for free. Innocent laughter echoed through the living room that had once been soaked in tears. I realized that happiness does not lie in clinging, but in knowing how to let go. And only when I let go of resentment did I truly find peace. With each passing day, I felt lighter. Instead of drowning in painful memories, I poured my energy into charity work. I joined the sisters at church, visiting nursing homes, hospitals, and orphanages. Once I sat talking with an elderly woman just a few years older than me. Her frail hand trembled as she clasped mine. "You are fortunate. You still have your health and a home. We here have nothing but waiting." Hearing that, I wept. I suddenly understood. My pain had never been the greatest. Perhaps it was in witnessing lives even more tragic than mine that I learned how to heal. My home gradually became a shelter for many. From time to time, I hosted small charity meals, inviting poor children and neighbors. The kitchen, once a stage for arguments, now rang with laughter. I felt my husband somewhere, smiling with peace of mind. What moved me most was when a little boy from the evening class told me, "Aunt Margaret, I wish my mother were like you, kind and strong." Those words warmed my heart in the strangest, most tender way. I needed no title, no recognition, just the innocent admiration in that child's eyes was enough to know I was living with true meaning. I realized rebirth does not come from erasing wounds, but from turning them into strength to love even more. I had walked through hell, and precisely because of that, I now cherish the simple heaven I have: a peaceful home, a heart wide open. One autumn afternoon, I sat on the porch, watching the golden sunlight stretch across the steps. In my hand was a cup of hot tea, its gentle fragrance mingling with the laughter of children studying in the living room. In that moment, I understood. At last, I had come full circle, from the depths of despair back to serenity. I no longer bore resentment toward Daniel or Vanessa. They chose the wrong path, and the price they paid was the clearest proof of karma. I only grieved for my son, who could have been his mother's pride, yet in the end became a bitter lesson. Lifting my gaze to the sky, I whispered softly, "Family is not just blood. True family is where love and respect exist." That sentence was the conclusion of my entire life. I had lost the son I once placed all my faith in, but I found a new family among strangers. Children in need of guidance, the elderly in need of companionship, and neighbors who understood compassion. I live simply, without luxury, yet my soul is free. And I understand that happiness does not lie in wealth or prestige, but in small moments, a shared meal, a pure smile, a heart willing to give,